One eyepiece category that has become increasingly popular over the last couple of years are zoom eyepieces, and it's not hard to see why. Advancements in optical design have allowed such eyepieces with a variable focal length to close the gap considerably to the fixed focal length options. They aren't quite there yet, and maybe will never be. But they've gotten close, so much so that getting one is definitely worth considering, not just for beginner setups but for upgrades as well. One of the newest zoom eyepieces to hit the market is the SV245 from Svbony. Following the big footsteps of the well-regarded SV230, it promises similar levels of performance at a more affordable price. So let's put exactly this to the test. Hi, I'm Bogdan Damian and welcome to another video review. Zoom eyepieces by definition have to manage a whole range of different focal lengths without compromising on optical quality, and thanks to optical limitations this is hard, really hard. By changing the focal length, these eyepieces have systems that allow them to physically adjust the distance between the lens elements inside. While this offers great flexibility, it usually also comes with some significant drawbacks, like a narrow field of view at the longer focal length settings, lower brightness due to the high number of lenses inside, and issues with sharpness across the whole focal length range. The SV245 seems to be doing things right because, at least on paper, this eyepiece looks promising. 8 to 16mm focal length, a decent and more important, constant 63 degrees apparent field of view across the entire focal length range, 18 to 17mm of eye relief, and all this while being parfocal across the entire focal length range. It's priced at $240 but can already be purchased for $190, which in theory makes it reasonably priced, especially when you compare it to the alternatives. Looking at the build quality, there is really nothing to complain about. Holding it in hand, the SV245 gives quite a good impression. It's well built, it's hefty, and the click-stop focal length selector is easy and smooth to operate. Speaking of weight, the SV245 is on the heavier side for a 1¼ inch eyepiece, is weighing just shy of ½ kilogram. The housing is completely made out of metal with a wide rubber grip ring around the waist and an M43 thread at the top for attaching astigmatism correcting lenses like the dioptrics from Teleview. You can also use this interface to connect the eyepiece directly to a DSLR camera and effectively use it as a camera lens for taking photos through the telescope. Inside the housing there are a total of 8 lens elements in 5 groups that are fully multi-coated, including darkened edges to minimize internal reflections and boost contrast. The bottom part also features a threaded 2-inch nose piece that accepts 2-inch filters. This won't give you better or wider views, but by using this instead of the 1¼ inch nose piece, you can directly use the 2-inch opening of the focuser on the telescope. And this might save up a couple of precious millimeters of back focus when using Newtonian reflectors. With refractors, SETs or Macs, this advantage is negated by the use of a 2-inch diagonal that by default require much more back focus than Another aspect worth mentioning is that this eyepiece is parfocal. This means that none or only minimal focus adjustments are necessary when changing the focal length setting. And if the implementation is good, then this feature can be really helpful. Alright, so the SV245 seems to check all the right boxes for a good zoom eyepiece, but how well does it perform under real conditions when observing the night sky? Testing was done using a 4-inch f7 ED refractor and a 6-inch f5 Newtonian reflector on nights with good seeing conditions from my backyard under Bortle 4 skies. The targets were the Moon, Jupiter, Mars, and a few stars with different magnitudes. From the onset, the SV245 presented beautiful, sharp and clear images that maintained their crispness almost to the very edge of the observable field. The field of view itself is notably flat, a quality not always found in zoom eyepieces, and this prevents any distorting fishbowl-like effect when sweeping across the night sky, which in turn leads to an immersive viewing experience. Although the 63 degrees apparent field of view isn't exceptionally wide, it's sufficient to comfortably fill the observer's field of vision, making the SV245 a good choice for observing planets as well as wider objects. What truly sets this eyepiece apart, though, is the consistent 63 degrees apparent field of view across the entire focal length range. This is a rare characteristic that makes the SV245 quite unusual. Here the only other zoom eyepieces that come to mind are the Teleview Nagler 3 to 6 mm zoom and the SV215 3 to 8 mm zoom from Svbony, but both feature far less interesting capabilities. Contrast is also good, while brightness is fairly high, in spite of it having 8 lens elements inside. To better illustrate the optical performance, I've taken a few daytime shots and compare it to, on one hand, the bigger brother, the SV230 SuperZoom, and on the other hand, with the fixed focal length 17.5 mm Morpheus eyepiece. For these tests, the eyepieces were attached to my 4-inch f7 ED refractor, and all camera settings were kept constant between the shots so we can compare them. As you can see in this first image, on-center sharpness and overall contrast of the SV245 is really good, almost on par with the Morpheus, which is definitely impressive for a zoom eyepiece. Brightness, however, does suffer a bit thanks to the complex optical system of the SV245. It's not dim by any standards and is only visible when we look at the images side by side. In the second shot, we can also see that the amount of extra chromatic aberrations coming from the eyepiece itself, not from the telescope, is negligible and on par with that of the other eyepieces, which again speaks for the quality of the glass used to make the lens elements and the coating applied to them. Overall, I do enjoy the viewing experience with the SV245 quite a bit. The zoom mechanism is smooth and works well under field conditions, while the click-stop feature is very useful. The eye relief is generous enough for comfortable viewing without glasses. Personally, I prefer observing without them. But if you do wear glasses, the 17 to 18 mm of eye relief might be a bit too short for comfortable viewing. The fact that this eyepiece is parfocal further enhances the good viewing experience. During my tests, only minimal adjustments to the focuser were necessary when changing the focal length settings. To test the SV245's performance during high-power planetary observations, I've paired it with the 2X Barlow from Teleview, effectively transforming it into a 4 to 8 mm zoom eyepiece. And no surprises here, the SV245 performed nicely under these conditions as well, delivering sharp and contrast-rich views. Compatibility with both mirror and prismatic bino viewers shouldn't be a problem either, since size-wise the SV245 is almost identical to the SV230, and two of those now sit permanently in my MaxBrite 2 prismatic bino. We have already looked at a couple of comparison shots between the SV245 and the SV230, but here is what this comparison boils down to. When looking at these two eyepieces, on one hand you have the constant apparent field of view of the SV245, which is definitely nice. But on the other hand you have the wider focal length range of the SV230, which goes up to 20 mm, and here the apparent field of view is 57 degrees. At this setting, it covers a slightly larger area of the night sky than the SV245. But overall, my personal preference lies with the SV230 because of the wider true field of view it produces with my telescopes. Compared to the Hyperion Mark IV from Balder Planetarium, the SV245 comes out on top in almost every category but brightness and true field of view. The SV245 is just as sharp and contrast rich. Furthermore, it features a wider field of view that is constant across the entire focal length range, and this is especially noticeable at longer focal length settings. For example, at 16 mm, the SV245 features a 63 degrees apparent field of view, while the Mark IV only achieves 58 degrees. But because of the wider focal length range of the Mark IV, the actual area of the sky shown at the longest focal length setting is larger than that of the SV245, in spite of the Mark IV having only an apparent field of view of 48 degrees at the 24 mm setting. So, regarding this comparison, it comes down to a constant but ultimately narrower true field of view and better brightness and a bit wider true field of view on the Mark IV. If we factor in the price, the SV245 that currently costs almost $100 less makes a compelling argument in its favor. As stated in the beginning of this video, in my opinion, zoom eyepieces have come a long way in the last few years, managing to elevate the optical performance to a level that is comparable to quality mid-tier eyepieces with fixed focal length designs. And the SV245 is fortunately no exception. Offering good contrast and decent brightness in combination with a wide and, more importantly, constant apparent field of view, all while being parfocal, the SV245 is a good option when it comes to getting a capable zoom eyepiece suited for high power and mid-range observations of the night sky. Anyway, that's been it. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, let me know what you think about the SV245 and zoom eyepieces in general. I'm very interested in reading your opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching and catch you guys in the next one.